Rain fell in thin, cold sheets over the Lisbon dockyard. The air was heavy with the smell of salt, oil, and the lingering smoke from the half-exploded shipping container where Eden, Mar, and Jonas had barely survived. Sirens wailed in the distance, not close enough to be an immediate threat, but growing louder, like wolves closing in. Aiden's ears still rang from the blast. He steadied himself against the rusted steel wall, brushing shrapnel dust from his jacket, his mind already piecing together the attack. Two assailants, trained, fast, the grenade was a message. Someone wanted them to know they were being hunted. Jonas zipped the duffel bag shut, the weapons inside clanked like a heartbeat. His hands trembled, his voice was tight. Why were they splitting up? Mara cut him off. She didn't want him to know that she was scared, that she was feeling exposed and hunted. Her sharp eyes scanned the rooftops as rainwater streaked down her face. Staying together made them a bigger target. The hunters already knew they were here. The only way to survive was to vanish. Lightning split the sky, lighting her face for a second. Calm, calculating, already thinking 10 moves ahead. Aiden looked at both of them, his face grave. He said they'd meet in 72 hours. No calls, no messages, total ghost mode. They exchanged a final glance, a mixture of trust and unspoken fear, then vanished into the night. 3 different directions, somewhere above them, on a rooftop overlooking the dockyard, a shadow crouched low. A jagged scar ran along their jawline, and a faint smirk tugged at their lips as they spoke into an earpiece. Their voice was calm, almost gentle, said the 3 would scatter. To track them all down, there was no reply, only a faint click of acknowledgement before the rooftop figure melted back into the darkness. Jonas moved fast through the maze of Lisbon's backstreets. The rain blurred the neon signs into bleeding streaks of red and blue. He pulled the duffel tighter under his jacket, though the weight dragged at his shoulders. Every few steps he glanced over his shoulder. At first, nothing, then someone. A tall man in a gray coat was walking on the opposite side of the street, his pace matching Jonas's. Jonas slowed, the man slowed. Jonas turned a corner, the man followed, his pulse began to spike. He took a sudden turn down a flight of stone steps slick with rain, boots slapping against them. But halfway down, a hand shot out of the shadows and yanked him into a narrow gap between 2 buildings. He started to struggle until he saw her. A woman, mid-30s, short dark hair, eyes like polished glass. She spoke softly, telling him not to scream, and held up a badge, Interpol. Across the city, Mar moved silently through the chaos of the night market. The air was thick with the scent of grilled fish and fried pastries, vendors shouting over each other, customers laughing under flickering strings of lights. She paused at a food stall, pretending to browse, but her attention was on the reflection in the polished steel counter. There he was, the same man who'd been watching her since the dockyard, or maybe his twin. Without breaking her act, she slid a knife from her sleeve and kept it hidden under her coat. As the man reached for her shoulder, she spun, quick as lightning, and pressed the blade against his ribs. She told him to smile, because they were in public. His grin was unsettling, almost pleased. He leaned in slightly and whispered that her friends couldn't save her now. Meanwhile, Aiden moved with purpose through the massive glass-roofed train station. The vaulted ceiling leaked from the storm outside, and the echo of wheels on rails filled the air. He boarded a late-night train bound for Madrid and chose a seat near the middle of the carriage. For a moment, he was alone. Then, without warning, someone slid into the seat beside him. A familiar voice said it had been a long time. Aiden turned his head slowly. It was Eli. He looked different. Clean-shaven, wearing a sharp black coat, holding a paper cup of coffee like it was no big deal. He said Aiden had a bounty on his head big enough to draw blood from anyone desperate enough, and that he could help make it disappear. Aiden's voice was low when he asked the catch. Eli sipped his coffee before answering. The catch was that Aiden would have to help the FBI catch the people hunting him. Far from the streets and stations, deep underground in a cold, dim room, a wall of photographs stretched from one end to the other. Aiden, Mara, Jonas, even Eli, and in the center, a new photo had just been added, the woman from Interpol. The scar-jawed figure from the rooftop stepped forward, hands clasped behind their back, staring at the wall. Their voice was barely more than a whisper. "The game will begin tonight." The night rolled on. A train roared into the darkness. A blade glinted under the flickering market lights. A badge closed over Jonas's face, and somewhere, hidden from all of them, the hunter smiled. The rain had not stopped by morning. Lisbon woke under a dull gray sky, its streets glistening, the air heavy with the scent of wet asphalt and diesel fumes. The storm had washed the city clean of last night's noise, but danger lingered in the cracks, moving quietly, unseen. Aiden didn't sleep. He sat in the train's dimly lit carriage, his reflection in the window fractured by rivulets of rain. The rhythmic sway of the tracks did little to settle his thoughts. Eli had not said another word since their conversation began. Just sat there sipping his coffee, watching the world blur past. The silence was a trap. Eli was letting Aiden think, letting him wonder how much he actually knew. Aiden studied him from the corner of his eye, same sharp mind, same uncheckable calm. But there was something new in the way he held himself, a weight in his posture, as if whatever he was hiding was heavier than both of them could carry. When the train plunged into a tunnel, their reflections merged on the dark glass and Eli finally spoke. "When we came in," he said, his voice echoing in the tunnel, "we weren't just looking for a bounty. No, this was personal. The hunter wasn't working alone. They were part of something bigger, something old with rules written in blood." Aiden leaned forward, his voice low. "Who are we dealing with?" he asked. Eli's answer came with a faint, humorless smile. "They call themselves the Veil." Across the city, the market had emptied, its colorful lights still flickering against the rain. Mara sat in the back of a small cafe, her knife resting under a folded napkin. The man she'd cornered sat opposite her, calm, unnervingly so, his wet hair plastered to his forehead. He told her she'd been marked. He told her running was useless. He told her the Veil didn't care about her past. All they cared about was balance, debts owed, debts paid. She asked him, "Who put my name on their list?" And his answer was a name she hadn't heard in years. The name froze her. Her fingers tightened around the knives held beneath the table. He leaned back, smiling faintly, and said, "You should consider this your last warning." Before Mara could respond, the cafe's door swung open and a gust of cold air swept in, bringing with it the woman from Interpol. She didn't look at Mara. She didn't look at the man. She simply walked to the counter, ordered a coffee, and waited. But Mara saw the faintest shift in the man's expression, the tiniest flicker of recognition. He stood abruptly, muttered something under his breath, and vanished into the rain. The woman from Interpol didn't move until he was gone. Then, without turning her head, she said Mara's name. He sat in a dimly lit room above a bakery. The steam from the ovens below rose through the floorboards. His duffel bag was open on the table, the weapons laid out like a surgeon's tools. The woman from Interpol, Agent Sloan, stood by the window. Her gaze was fixed on the street below. She told him bluntly, "You're a liability." He asked why she had pulled him from the alley. Whoever was following him could have easily gotten away. She said that she wasn't in the business of rescuing people. She was in the business of catching them. Jonas tensed, his hand brushing against the cold metal of a pistol in his pocket. She told him to relax. If she wanted him in handcuffs, he would already be in them. She didn't want him in custody. She wanted him as bait. Miles away, in a dark room filled with the soft hum of servers and the faint flicker of security feeds, the scar-jawed figure watched intently. On one screen, Aiden sat across from Eli in the train. On another, Mara's cafe table stood empty. On the third, Jonas was pacing like a caged animal. The hunter traced a finger along the edge of the screen, showing Mara, pausing over her face. Then they spoke into the headset, instructing their unseen operators to prepare the net. Not yet, but soon, the train to Madrid slowed as it approached a small rural station. Eli stood, tossing his empty coffee cup into a bin and telling Aiden to follow. They stepped onto the wet platform as the train pulled away, leaving them alone under the dim station lights. A single car waited at the edge of the lot, engine idling. Inside sat a man in a dark suit with eyes that were too sharp for his smile. Eli introduced him as Mason, a fixer. Mason shook Aiden's hand, his grip too firm, his gaze holding just a fraction too long. He said they had a safe house somewhere no one could touch them. Aiden didn't believe him, but he got in the car anyway. Back in Lisbon, Mara walked alongside Agent Sloan, their footsteps echoing under the narrow archways of the Alfama district. Sloan spoke as they moved. She explained that the Veil wasn't just a syndicate. It was a ledger, a balance sheet written in human lives. If they came for you, it meant your name had been bought, your fate already accounted for. Mara asked how she knew all this. Sloan didn't answer. Instead, she handed Mara a small, sealed envelope and told her not to open it until she was alone. Then, without another word, she disappeared into the crowd, leaving Mara standing in the rain, the envelope heavy in her palm. Jonas wasn't in the bakery loft anymore. He was in the back of a moving van. The sound of tires on wet cobblestones filling the air. Agent Sloan had arranged a relocation, she said, safer than staying in one place. But the further they drove, the less Jonas believed it. He noticed the van's driver hadn't spoken once. When he tried the door, it was locked. He glanced at the small, wire mesh window separating him from the front and saw the driver's face in the rearview mirror. It wasn't Sloan's driver, it was the man in the gray coat. Aiden finally spoke up in the safe house. "What's your angle, Eli?" Eli sat on the edge of the table, lit a cigarette and said, "Sometimes you can't win a fight. You can only buy time." The Veil didn't stop. The only way to survive was to make yourself more valuable alive than dead. Aiden asked, "So you work for them?" Eli blew out a stream of smoke and said, "If the Veil wants you dead, working for them is the same as digging your own grave. It just bought you a better view before the dirt covered your face. Somewhere, deep in the network of alleys and backrooms that the city's shadows belonged to, the hunter closed a phone call. Their expression was calm, controlled, satisfied. They whispered one sentence to themselves, the words almost swallowed by the rain outside. The pieces were moving, and soon the board would be set. The night was colder than usual, and the city's skyline seemed to have lost some of its light, as if even the streets were holding their breath. In a dimly lit apartment tucked away in the industrial district, Adam sat by the window, a cigarette slowly burning between his fingers. The smoke curled lazily toward the ceiling, disappearing into the shadows. His eyes weren't on the street below. They were fixed on the reflection in the glass, his own face, tired, worn, and holding secrets too heavy for one man to bear. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, a reminder that the city hadn't forgotten him. Miles away, in the back of a small cafe, Elena stirred her tea, not because it needed stirring, but because her hands needed something to do. She had been followed again, not by a cop, but by someone who moved with the confidence of a predator. She could feel the presence even before she saw the shadow at the door. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. The figure slipped inside and sat down opposite her. He wore a plain black coat, but his eyes told another story. "They're close," he said in a low voice. "Closer than you think." Meanwhile, across the river, in an abandoned warehouse, Victor paced between stacks of crates. He had built his empire on being 2 steps ahead, but lately it felt like someone else was moving the pieces. The stolen bonds from the last job were supposed to be safe, hidden where no one could find them. But now there were whispers of a leak, a rat. He stopped pacing and slammed his fist into a crate, the wood splintered under the force. "Find them," he ordered one of his men. "Find them and bring me their head." Back in the city center, Adam's phone buzzed, a single message, "Meet me where it began." His mind instantly flashed back to that night, the start of everything, the beginning of the heist that had changed all their lives. He grabbed his coat, leaving the cigarette burning in the ashtray, and slipped out into the night. The streets felt different, emptier, and every shadow seemed to move. He arrived at the old railway station, long abandoned and eaten away by rust. The moment he stepped inside, he saw her. Elena stood in the middle of the platform, the faint glow from a broken street lamp catching her face. She looked older, harder, but her eyes still carried the fire he remembered. "We don't have much time," she whispered. "They're going to take everything from us if we don't move first." Before Adam could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed through the station, heavy, deliberate. They weren't alone. From the far end of the platform, a man emerged, tall and sharp, with a smirk that said he knew something they didn't. Adam's instincts screamed danger. The man stopped a few meters away, tilting his head as if studying them. "You have something that belongs to me," he said, his voice calm, almost polite. The air seemed to tighten around them. Adam glanced at Elena, but she was already reaching for the small pistol hidden under her coat. The stranger's smirk widened. "Careful," he said softly. "Pull that trigger and you won't leave this station alive." Then, without warning, the overhead lights flickered once and went out completely. The sound of boots on metal rang out from every direction. They were surrounded. The darkness swallowed the station whole. Adam could barely make out Elena's silhouette in front of him, but he could hear her breathing, controlled, steady. Somewhere in the black, boots kept moving, circling, tightening the trap. A low, metallic hum filled the air as one by one, small tactical flashlights snapped on, beams slicing through the gloom like blades. 5, maybe 6 figures in black moved in perfect formation, their faces hidden behind masks. The tall man with the smirk had vanished, as if he'd been swallowed by the shadows he commanded. Adam's pulse quickened. He stepped back until his heel touched the edge of the platform. The drop to the tracks was just behind him. Elena didn't move. Her hand was steady on the pistol, but she hadn't raised it yet. These weren't amateurs. The way they moved, the way they kept their distance, they were trained professionals. Then a voice came, calm and almost amused, drifting through the station like smoke. "You think you're hunters, but tonight you're prey." Adam felt a flicker of rage under his fear. "What do you want?" he shouted into the dark. The voice was closer now, almost in his ear. "What's mine? The bonds, the money, and the truth you've been hiding." Elena finally spoke, her voice sharp as glass. "You'll never see them." There was a pause, then the sound of metal on metal. A flare burst to life, filling the space with a violent red glow. The figures moved instantly, closing in. Adam grabbed Elena's arm, pulling her toward the side exit, but two masked men cut them off. A fight erupted in the crimson haze. Fists, elbows, the crunch of bone against bone. Adam ducked a blow and drove his knee into one attacker's gut, sending him sprawling. Elena fired once, the shot deafening in the enclosed space, and one of the masked figures dropped, but more were coming, too many. Adam grabbed Elena's hand and yanked her toward the tracks. "Jump," he barked. They landed hard on the gravel, the sound echoing up into the darkness. Without looking back, they ran down the tunnel, the red glow fading behind them. The shouts followed, then the sound of boots pounding metal. After what felt like forever, they stumbled into a service corridor, ducking into a maintenance room. Adam slammed the door and threw the lock. Both of them were breathing hard, the silence between them filled with the thundering of their hearts. "They knew," Elena said finally, her voice barely more than a whisper. "They knew exactly where we'd be." "That means," Adam finished for her, "we have a rat." The words hung heavy in the air. If there was a leak in their circle, it meant no one was safe. Not the stash, not them, not anyone who still carried a piece of the heist in their hands. Far above them, in an office that overlooked the river, Victor stood in front of a wall of maps and photographs. His phone buzzed. He picked it up, listened, and without a word, ended the call. Slowly, a smile crept across his face. Not the smile of a man who just won, but of a man who knew the game had only just begun. And in that moment, Adam and Elena had no idea that every step they took from here on out was already being watched. The night was heavy with rain. It fell in slow sheets, turning the city into a shimmering blur of lights and shadows. Adam stood by the small, cracked window of the safe house, watching the water run down the glass. Somewhere in the maze of streets below, someone they trusted had already sold them out. Elena was at the table, her laptop cast a pale glow over her face. She'd been silent for hours, digging through old communications, encrypted message logs, location pings, anything that could reveal the leak. Every now and then she'd pause, her fingers hovering above the keys as if she were afraid of what she might find. Finally, she spoke. "I've narrowed it down to 3 names," she said. But only one had direct access to the drop point, where we kept the first half of the bonds. Adam didn't move from the window. "Who?" She hesitated. "Michael." The name hit like a punch. Michael had been with them from the beginning. He'd risked his life during the vault breach, held the line when the alarms went off, even taken a bullet in the leg during their escape. Adam couldn't picture him turning, but the facts were merciless. "Where is he now?" Adam asked. Elena checked the feed, hiding in plain sight. "Dockside, Pier 47, same place he used to meet contacts before the heist." Adam turned, his eyes cold. "Then we pay him a visit." Pier 47 at night was a wasteland of rusted containers, broken cranes, and the soft creak of water against the pilings. The fog was thick enough to swallow sound, and the sodium lights burned weak halos into the mist. They moved silently, their footsteps muffled on the wet wood. Up ahead, through the fog, they saw him, Michael, leaning against a stack of cargo crates, smoking. His hair was longer, his clothes rougher, but that posture, Adam knew it too well. "Michael," Adam called out. The man froze and slowly turned. His eyes flickered with something, surprise, guilt, relief, but his face stayed unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Elena stepped forward, her voice was low and dangerous. "You sold us out." Michael's jaw tightened. "I didn't sell you out, I saved you. You think Victor's just after the money?" "No, he wants to erase everyone who touched it. You too, you were already dead." Adam felt his grip on control slipping. "Then explain the ambush. Explain how they knew our exact route. Explain why one of their men was using your comm frequency." Michael's lips trembled for a moment, but then his shoulders sagged. "Because I told them," he said. "I made a deal. I give them just enough to keep them off my back, and they leave you alone." Elena's voice cracked with fury. "They almost killed us." Michael, before he could answer, the world exploded in light. Flood lamps blazed from the rooftops. The sound of engines roared through the pier. Black vans skidded to a halt and masked men poured out like shadows given flesh. Michael's eyes went wide. This wasn't supposed to happen. Adam grabbed Elena's arm. "Move." They darted between crates, bullets sparking off the steel. The smell of gunpowder mixing with the salty air. Michael shouted something, maybe a warning, maybe a plea, but his voice was swallowed by the chaos. Adam caught a glimpse of him being tackled by 2 of the masked men before they were gone, dragging him into the van. And just like that, Michael was out of their hands. Whether he was a traitor, a pawn, or something in between didn't matter anymore. Victor had him now, far away in the glow of a dim office. Victor poured himself a drink. On the table before him was a photograph of Michael, Adam, Elena, and the rest of the crew, all smiles on the day before the heist. He traced Michael's face with his finger, then looked at the empty chair in front of him. "Now," he murmured, "we see who breaks first." The rain had stopped, but the city still dripped with the memory of it. Adam sat on the edge of the bed in the safe house, staring at the gun in his hands. It was clean, loaded, and useless against the kind of enemy they were up against. Elena was pacing the room like a caged animal. She hadn't slept since Pier 47, and the shadows under her eyes told Adam she wouldn't anytime soon. The loss of Michael, whether to betrayal or capture, had shattered something in her. Finally, she stopped, bracing her hands against the wall. "We can't just wait here," she said. "Victor's not going to stop. He'll use Michael to get to us. Or worse, he'll use us to get to Michael. We need a new plan." Adam didn't answer right away. He was remembering the look on Michael's face, that mix of defiance and desperation. The way he'd said it wasn't supposed to happen. The thing about lies is sometimes they wear the same clothes as the truth. I know where Victor's keeping him, Adam said quietly. Elena turned. How? Adam stood up, slipping the gun into the back of his belt. Because Victor's a creature of habit. Before the heist, when I worked with him on smaller jobs, he always took high-value prisoners to one of two places, the Blue Spire building downtown or the underground docks beneath Eastport. Elena's eyes narrowed. And you think you can just walk in there? Adam gave a half smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, not walk, but there's a way in. And it's not the front door. Hours later, the city glowed like a sleeping beast beneath them. Elena and Adam crouched on the rooftop, overlooking the Blue Spire. It was a black glass tower stabbing into the night sky, its upper floors lit with warm gold, like a predator smiling. Through binoculars, Elena scanned the windows. She froze. Third floor from the top, room on the east corner. That's him. Michael sat chained to a chair, his head bowed. There was the man in the room with him. Tall, broad shoulders, standing perfectly still like a shadow cut from stone. Victor's man, Adam muttered. If he's there, then Victor's close. Elena lowered the binoculars. So what's the plan? Adam's gaze swept the building. There's a maintenance shaft that runs the length of the tower, sealed, but I know the access point. We get in there. We reach Michael before they know we're inside. Elena exhaled. And if they do know, Adam chambered around. Then we improvise. The maintenance shaft was colder than they expected. Metal walls slick with condensation. The sound of their own breathing seemed too loud. Every creak of their boots echoed like a scream. They climbed floor after floor until Adam whispered, "We're here." He pushed against the grate and it came loose with a groan. Beyond it was the east corner room. It was dimly lit. Michael sat exactly as they'd seen him. Head still down, Adam slipped through first, gun ready. Elena followed, her steps silent. Michael, Adam whispered, no response. He stepped closer, placing a hand on Michael's shoulder. The body was warm, but limp. Adam's stomach dropped. He tilted Michael's head up. His eyes were open, but unfocused, pupils like pinpricks. Drugged, Elena murmured. A voice spoke from the shadows, smooth, deep, and cruel. Only enough to keep him quiet, for now. Victor stepped into the light wearing a charcoal suit that looked like it had been tailored in hell itself. Behind him, two armed men blocked the only exit. Adam raised his gun. Let him go. Victor smiled like a man who had already won. You came to me, that's convenient. Elena's voice was sharp. You're making a mistake. Victor chuckled. No, my dear. The only mistake here is believing this is about the money. It never was. He took a slow step forward, eyes locked on Adam. This is about loyalty. About finding the ones who think they can walk away from me. Adam's grip tightened on the gun, but he didn't fire. Not yet. Victor was too calm, too certain. And that meant there was more to this trap than they could see. From somewhere deeper in the room came a faint ticking sound. Elena's eyes darted to the corner, a black case, small, sleek, and counting down. Tick-tock, Adam, she whispered. Victor's smile widened. Let's see how fast you really are. The ticking was louder now, every click of the timer chewing away at the seconds they didn't have. Adam's mind split in two, one part calculating the distance to Victor, the other fixated on that black case in the corner. Victor stood perfectly still, the smug curve of his mouth telling them this wasn't a bluff. Behind him, his two guards gripped their weapons tighter, waiting for the order. Elena was already moving, eyes locked on the case, but Adam caught her wrist. Not yet, he murmured. Victor's gaze flicked between them, amused. You really think you have time for a whispered conference? Adam ignored him. He bent down, hauling Michael upright. The man was heavy with whatever drug they'd pumped into him, his head lolling, his breath shallow. How long? Adam asked. Victor tilted his head, pretending to think. 3 minutes. Enough time for you to regret every choice that brought you here. Elena's eyes darted to Adam's. She didn't need to say it. 3 minutes was barely enough to disable a lock, let alone drag a drugged man out of an armed tower. The first guard stepped forward. Boss? Victor raised a finger without looking at him. Not yet, I want them to feel the clock. Adam's grip tightened on his gun. His mind was racing. Victor wanted them cornered. That meant there was still a way out, but it wouldn't be obvious. A faint hum filled the room. Elena noticed it first, a vibration running through the floor beneath their feet. She crouched, pressing her palm to the cold surface. Her eyes went wide. Adam, the floor's wired. Victor chuckled, slow and deliberate. She's quick. Yes, you see, the case is just the starter pistol. When it reaches 0, this whole floor becomes a memory. Adam's pulse kicked into overdrive. What do you want, Victor? Victor's smile flattened into something colder. I want you to choose the boy or yourselves. Michael stirred slightly, mumbling something Adam couldn't make out. His eyes were glassy but pleading. Elena's hand twitched toward her hidden knife. Adam caught the movement. It was a signal between them, honed by too many close calls. She was going for the case, but Victor wasn't stupid. The second she shifted, the nearest guard raised his weapon. Adam didn't think he fired. The shot cracked the room open like a whip. The guard dropped before he could react, but the other one lunged, knocking Adam back against the wall. The timer was ticking away. Elena dove for the case, sliding across the floor. Her hands flew over the locks, but it wasn't a standard mechanism. No wires to cut, no easy latch to snap. Just a smooth, sealed box with a digital readout now screaming to 11. Victor moved faster than they expected, closing the distance between them in 2 long strides. He grabbed Elena's arm and wrenched her back. Slamming her against the wall, the case clattered across the floor, spinning until it stopped at Adam's feet. He kicked it toward her and raised his gun at Victor. Let him go. Victor's eyes gleamed. You're wasting seconds. The timer hit 1:37. Michael moaned again, trying to push himself up. His voice was a rasp, barely there. Don't trust him, Adam said, but there was no time. Elena ripped open a small pouch from her belt, pulling out a device barely larger than a coin, a portable signal disruptor. She slammed it against the case and the device sparked as it overloaded the electronics inside. The timer froze at 0:52. Victor's face darkened. Clever, Adam fired again, forcing Victor to retreat just enough for Elena to grab Michael. They half-dragged, half-carried him toward the maintenance shaft. But as Adam glanced back, he saw Victor wasn't chasing them. He was smiling again. The hum beneath the floor hadn't stopped. Adam's stomach sank. Elena, it wasn't the case. From somewhere deep in the building, a roar began, the sound of concrete tearing apart, metal screaming under pressure. The explosion wasn't in this room, it was in the structure itself. The floor lurched beneath them, glass shattered. Alarms howled through the night. Elena's grip tightened on Michael. Move. They dove into the maintenance shaft just as the world above them erupted in fire and debris. The blast wave chased them down the shaft, a wall of heat and dust threatening to swallow them whole. And somewhere in that chaos, Adam swore he heard Victor's voice, calm, almost amused. This isn't over. The wind cut like glass as Adam crouched on the rooftop, his breath turning to steam in the icy night air. Below, the city pulsed with 1,000 lights, unaware that somewhere in its veins, a quiet war was unfolding. Beside him, Elena adjusted the scope on her rifle, her eyes narrowing on the building across the street, Victor's temporary headquarters. They tracked him here after days of dead ends and false trails. Now, finally, they had a location, but not a plan. Adam's instincts told him it was too easy, too quiet. Elena, he whispered, you ever get the feeling you're already inside the trap before you realize it? She didn't answer. Her finger was still on the trigger, but her breathing slowed. He's not here, she finally said. He left something for us. A sudden vibration buzzed in Adam's jacket pocket. He pulled out a burner phone, one they'd never used, never even turned on before. The screen lit up with a single text. Look up. Adam's eyes shot to the rooftop above Victor's building and froze. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the cold moonlight. No mask, no weapon, just standing and staring directly at them. Elena, Adam murmured. That's he never finished the sentence. The rooftop beneath them erupted in a concussive blast. The world flipped sideways and the night became a blur of smoke, fire, and deafening silence. Adam's ears rang as he rolled to the edge, vision swimming. He caught a glimpse of Elena being dragged away by two black-clad men before a boot slammed into his ribs and sent him tumbling into darkness. When he woke, he was somewhere else. The room was dim, lit only by a flickering strip of fluorescent light. Chains hung from the ceiling, the air smelled of rust and damstone. Across from him, seated in a chair with her hands bound, was Elena, bruised, blood on her temple, but alive. And standing between them, his shadow stretching across the floor, was Victor. Finally, Victor said, his voice low and measured. "We can talk." Adam's muscles tensed, every nerve screaming for him to lunge, to fight, but something in Victor's eyes made him stop. This wasn't rage. This wasn't a victory speech. This was something colder. "You think this is about the money?" Victor stepped closer. "The money was bait. What I want is the list, the names of every man and woman who touched the vault that night. And I know you have it." Adam stayed silent, his mind racing. If Victor got that list, everyone connected to the heist would be dead within days. Victor leaned in, his breath hot against Adam's ear. "You have 1 hour. After that, you choose who dies first, her or you." The heavy door clanged shut, and Adam was left in the echoing dark, chained to the floor, the clock ticking louder with every passing second. The fluorescent light above flickered like a dying heartbeat. Adam sat perfectly still, his wrists burning from the cuffs, his mind racing. Somewhere in the shadows, Elena shifted against her restraints, her breathing uneven. "You're thinking about breaking out?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the single light. "I'm thinking about who sold us out," Adam replied, his eyes fixed on the steel door. "Because Victor didn't just guess where we'd be. Someone told him." The silence that followed was heavier than the chains. Adam could almost hear the weight of the truth pressing down on both of them. A faint sound, soft, rhythmic, drifted through the room. Not footsteps, a ticking. Adam's gaze darted upward. On the far wall, a small device pulsed with a red light. A bomb, not the kind meant to send a message, the kind meant to erase an entire room from existence. 30 minutes, Adam's pulse quickened. His mind flashed through options, none of them good. "Elena, can you reach the hook on the chain?" he asked. She tried, twisting her arms painfully, but the metal link stayed taut. "No," she hissed. "We're not getting out without a key." The lock clicked. The heavy door groaned open. A figure stepped inside, hooded, face hidden. They carried a small black duffel. Without a word, they dropped it on the floor and knelt in front of Adam. The hood came down. It was Marcus, Adam's oldest friend, the man who bled with him in the vault. Marcus didn't meet his eyes as he unlocked the cuffs. "No time to explain," he muttered. "You both need to move, now." Adam's muscles screamed as blood returned to his hands. "Why are you here?" Marcus hesitated. "Because I didn't think he'd actually kill you, but I can't go with you." "He's watching me. Elena and I aren't leaving without answers," Adam growled. "You don't have the luxury," Marcus said, shoving a folded piece of paper into Adam's hand. "Read it when you're clear of here, and don't trust anyone, not even me." They slipped into the corridor, the ticking from the bomb fading behind them. The hallway was a labyrinth of pipes and rusted metal doors, dimly lit by strips of failing light. Marcus led them to a service hatch. "Go, the sewers lead out to the docks." Before Adam could speak, Marcus was gone, vanishing back into the maze. At the docks, the night air was a shock after the stifling room. Adam finally unfolded the paper. Inside was a single name. It wasn't the rat in their crew, it wasn't even someone from the heist. It was someone Adam thought was dead, and if the name was true, then Victor wasn't the real enemy. The wind at the docks was sharp, carrying the sting of salt water and oil. Adam stared at the name on the paper as if it might burn through his fingers. Elena leaned in, her voice trembling. "Who is it?" He didn't answer right away. The name carved through him like a knife, a name from a past buried so deep he'd convinced himself it didn't exist anymore. Elena, he finally whispered, this changes everything. Her eyes narrowed. Tell me. Before he could, a Loham rolled over the docks. A boat emerged from the fog, its deck lights cutting pale circles in the night. On board, shadowy figures moved with precision. Not Victor's men, but something else, something more organized. They're here for us, Elena said, instinctively reaching for the pistol Marcus had slipped her. No, Adam murmured, folding the paper and sliding it into his jacket. They're here for me. The boat slowed, drifting close to the pier. A tall man stepped onto the deck, his face hidden in shadow. But the voice that called out was unmistakable, deep, calm, commanding. Adam, the man said, you've been running long enough. It's time to come home. Elena froze. Who is that? Adam's jaw clenched. Someone I swore was dead. The man stepped into the light. Adam's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't Victor, it wasn't anyone from the heist. It was his father. The boat's engines roared, spotlights locking on Adam and Elena. The dock exploded in chaos as black-clad operatives swarmed the pier. Adam shoved Elena behind a crate, gunfire cracking the night apart. Adam, his father's voice thundered over the noise. You have 1 minute to decide. Come with me, or she dies. Adam's heart pounded in his ears. The seconds bled away, the shouts and gunfire blurring into white noise. He met Elena's eyes, her lips moved, forming a single word, run. The gunshots stopped. Silence fell, a spotlight fixed on Adam's face. And then cut to black,